A millionaire got a beggar pregnant, and everyone laughed at him. But 5 years later, everyone regretted it. It was a cold night, one of those when the wind cut your face, and the silence of the rich city contrasted with the noise of the streets full of uncertainty. In a luxurious neighborhood, across from an expensive restaurant, Lucas, a millionaire businessman, was leaving yet another meeting. He was surrounded by influential people, but the weight of success no longer had the same shine as before. The tiredness etched on his face was invisible to those who saw it from the outside. But inside him, something seemed out of place. As he walked distractedly to his luxury car, a scene made him stop. There, next to a trash can, a young woman with worn clothes and disheveled hair tried to keep warm with a thin blanket. She wasn't asking for anything. She just curled up, trying to disappear in the middle of the city that ignored her. Lucas, used to not noticing these invisible figures, felt something different. He stared at her for a moment longer than usual. There was something in her gaze, a mixture of pain and dignity, that touched him in a way he couldn't explain. He hesitated. What if someone saw him talking to her? What would they think? The idea of exposing himself to judgment made him uncomfortable. But for some reason, he couldn't go on. He approached slowly, and she noticed. The young woman slowly raised her eyes, as if she wasn't expecting anything, but at the same time she had a shine that defied his reality. Lucas awkwardly offered her money. She refused in a low but firm voice. "I don't want a handout," she said in a tone that disarmed him. He was used to solving everything with money, but right there, at that moment, it seemed useless. "So what do you want?" Lucas asked, not understanding why he was so interested in the answer. The woman, whose name he still didn't know, simply answered, "I just want a chance, an opportunity to be seen as someone." Those words echoed in Lucas's mind. It wasn't just about money, status, or charity. It was about humanity. He couldn't explain it, but something about that unlikely encounter moved him. Suddenly, he found himself offering something more than money, something he himself didn't know if he had to give. Time, attention. And so, between two very different worlds, their first encounter took place. An encounter that began with judgments, but that somehow opened space for something much deeper. Lucas didn't know it, but that night would be the beginning of a story that would change his life forever. The night after their first date was different for Lucas. He couldn't stop thinking about the young woman who had refused his money. It bothered him in a way he couldn't explain. His world was made up of transactions, agreements, and numbers. People like her were invisible, part of the city's landscape, but that young woman, she had stayed in his mind. A few days later, Lucas met her again. Her name was Sophia, and over time, their casual conversations on the streets became more frequent, more profound. There was an unexpected connection there, a kind of silent understanding between the two of them. She told him about her difficult life, the reasons that had led her to the streets, but she never played the victim. He, in turn, began to see the world from a new perspective, questioning everything he believed to be important. On an autumn night, when the loneliness of both seemed greater than ever, it happened. Without planning, without clear intention, they got involved. For Lucas, it was a moment of escape from his life of appearances, and for Sophia, it was a rare moment of human connection. Neither of them could have imagined the consequences of this act. A few weeks later, Sophia discovered she was pregnant. The impact of this news was devastating for Lucas. He, a man accustomed to having control over all areas of his life, found himself faced with a situation that he could not simply fix with money. The pregnancy of a young woman living on the streets, the result of a relationship outside of any convention, soon became a topic of conversation. The rumor spread, and the scandal quickly reached the media. The news exploded. Millionaire gets homeless woman pregnant. It was headline news in newspapers, gossip sites, and even TV shows commented on the case. His colleagues, friends, and even his family laughed at his irresponsibility. How could he, a successful man, get involved with someone like that? The questions were full of contempt and irony. For them, it was a joke. For Lucas, it was chaos. The pressure was immense. People attacked him from all sides, suggesting that he distance himself, that he resolve this in the most practical way. Some suggested paying Sophia to disappear, while others thought he should take responsibility for the child, but never for the woman. What would he do now? Give up the life he had built, or follow the unwritten rules of the elite who always knew how to deal with scandals so well? And Sophia? She was scared, of course, but also determined. Unlike Lucas, she had nothing to lose. "I'm going to have this child with or without you," she told him in a tense conversation. Her fear was real, but it was also the courage of someone who had already survived without the expectation of being welcomed. Lucas, confused and under enormous pressure, didn't know what to do. The doubt between keeping his reputation intact or assuming the consequences of that relationship consumed him. He thought about running away, paying for everything to disappear, like many did. But every time he looked at Sophia, something inside him stopped him from taking the easy way out. And so, the millionaire who always had everything under control found himself in the middle of a storm that no amount of money could solve. Sophia's pregnancy wasn't just a scandal, it was proof of who he really was. And now, with the world laughing in his face and responsibility knocking on his door, he would have to make the most difficult decision of his life. The news of Sophia's pregnancy spread like wildfire. Lucas, used to being respected and admired for his wealth and influence, now found himself the target of laughter and malicious comments. He could no longer go into a restaurant, attend a social event, or even walk down the street without feeling the judgmental looks and ironic whispers. What he feared most, the scandal and public humiliation, was now his reality. His friends, those who always surrounded him at parties and dinners, never missed an opportunity to make cruel jokes. "You've outdone yourself, huh, Lucas?" they would say with disguised laughter. "How did you fall so low?" Others, more direct, advised him to resolve the situation elegantly, suggesting that he pay Sophia to disappear and clean up his image. But he wasn't the only one at the center of this storm. Sophia, already accustomed to being ignored by people, now felt the weight of rejection in an even more brutal way. If before she had been invisible, now she had become the target of contempt and hatred. Society saw her as someone who had taken advantage of Lucas, who had ruined the reputation of a powerful man. Malicious comments were made at every turn. "What does this beggar want? She's after his money, of course." People didn't even bother to hide it. When they saw her on the streets, their contempt was immediate. They looked at her with disgust, as if her presence were a reminder of Lucas's failure, a stain on the perfect society they imagined themselves to be part of. She felt every one of these looks, every whisper. Her situation was already precarious, but now it seemed like the world wanted to crush her even more. Lucas, on the other hand, was increasingly distancing himself from those who had once been his friends. He didn't know who to trust. His family, traditional and conservative, was the one that reacted the most harshly. "This is a disgrace to us," they said. His father, an influential businessman, was blunt. "You have tarnished our family's name. How do you think others will see us now?" His mother wept silently, not knowing what to say or how to react. For them, the situation was more than a scandal. It was a personal disaster. Pressured from all sides, Lucas began to feel the weight of rejection in a way he had never experienced before. The world that had once admired him now ridiculed him. He was isolated, and each day seemed like a battle against himself, against what others expected him to do. Meanwhile, Sophia was dealing with her own battle. Pregnant and still without a fixed place to live, she faced reality with her head held high, but fear was constant. She knew that many doors would be closed to her, that any help would be denied because of the scandal. To the world, she was nothing more than an opportunist, someone who used her pregnancy to get ahead in life. But deep down, Sophia knew that she was carrying much more than a judgment. She was carrying a life, and for her, that was what mattered. Lucas and Sophia, each in their own way, faced the weight of public humiliation. She, with the hardness of someone who had lived on the margins, and he, with the pain of someone who had always had everything and was now discovering how much the opinion of others could destroy. Together, but still far apart in their own worlds, they tried to survive this storm. And the more time passed, the clearer it became that the choice to move forward, even against everything and everyone, would be the true test for both of them. While the world laughed and judged them, the bond between them, although fragile, began to grow stronger. After all, in the midst of so much rejection, it was each other that remained. But the road ahead was still long, and society was merciless. With her belly growing bigger every month, Sophia faced a daily battle on the streets. People's rejection only increased. Where before there had been only indifference, there was now open contempt. Being a pregnant homeless woman did not make her more vulnerable in the eyes of others. On the contrary, it seemed to make things worse. She walked the streets with a clear goal: to survive. Sophia knew she could not count on anyone, much less on the support of Lucas, who was increasingly distant, wrapped up in his own problems and pressures. Society pressured him to keep his distance, and he seemed to give in. Sophia, however, had no choice. All she had was the life growing inside her. The nights were cold and lonely. Sleeping was a challenge. The shelters were always full or refused to take her in when they realized she was pregnant. She would often huddle in some corner of the city, afraid of being attacked or harassed. Hunger was a constant companion. Some days, Sophia would go without eating, leaving the little she received in alms to provide water and something for the baby. Her body felt weaker, but her determination to protect the life she carried kept her going. Pregnancy made things even more difficult. Sophia dealt with pain, nausea, and extreme fatigue that added to her already exhausting routine on the streets. She felt alone, without support, but she never thought about giving up. With each movement of the baby inside her, she found new strength. She knew that this child was her only hope for a better future, and she refused to let her circumstances defeat her. On a sunny afternoon, she tried to seek help at a community clinic. The people there looked at her strangely, not very willing to help her. The nurse, tired and hurried, asked mechanical questions, without showing any real interest in her condition. When Sophia mentioned that she had nowhere to live, the woman shook her head and said, "We do what we can, but maybe it's better for you to seek other assistance." She left there feeling like she was a burden on society, someone no one wanted to help. But when she put her hand on her belly and felt the baby move, a flame of determination was rekindled. "I will protect you," she whispered to herself. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. The difficulties did not diminish. Sophia began to suffer from swelling in her legs and back pain. Moving around the streets became increasingly difficult, but she kept going, asking for help wherever she could, always with her son in mind. There were moments of complete despair, nights when she cried alone, not knowing what she would do the next day. However, even in those moments, Sophia found strength within herself. The desire to give her baby a dignified life was greater than the pain and fear. She knew that, somehow, she had to survive because her son depended on it. On one of the most difficult nights, while sheltering in a canopy during a storm, she looked up at the sky, trying to find answers. All she saw was darkness. But in that silence of the sleeping city, Sophia made a promise. She promised that she would fight until the end, that her son would have a chance, even if she had to face the world alone. Every day was a victory. Every step she took, no matter how difficult, was a sign of her strength. And even when everything seemed lost, Sophia believed in something greater. She believed in the life she was about to bring into the world. Deep down, she knew that this child would change everything. Maybe Lucas would never come back, maybe the world would never accept her, but Sophia was determined to give her baby the love and protection she never had. And with this determination, she moved forward, steadfast in the fight for her survival and that of the child she was carrying. After all, her fight was no longer just for herself. While Sophia was struggling on the streets, Lucas was living a deep and constant dilemma. To the outside world, he remained the successful millionaire, attending meetings and events, maintaining the appearance of control. But inside, he was in conflict. The scandal of Sophia's pregnancy had ruined his peace and brought to the surface questions he had never asked himself. With each passing day, the pressure of society on Lucas increased. His friends continued to ridicule him, suggesting easy and cold solutions. "You need to think about yourself, Lucas. Let this woman get on with her life," a business colleague would say over dinner. The sly smiles, the jokes between the lines, it all suffocated him. He knew that if he publicly took responsibility for the child and kept in touch with Sophia, his reputation would be ruined. For high society, associating with someone of her social standing was unthinkable. His family, as always, maintained a rigid and unforgiving stance. His father, in particular, never missed an opportunity to reprimand him. "Are you going to throw away everything we've built? For God's sake, Lucas, be sensible," he would say, almost desperately, as if his son's behavior were a personal affront to the family's image. On the other hand, Lucas couldn't get Sophia out of his head. Something about her strength moved him deeply. He hadn't gotten involved with her out of charity or pity. There was something genuine about that connection, an authenticity that he didn't find in the circle he lived in. She didn't ask for anything from him. She never pressured him to take on any responsibility, but ironically, that only made Lucas feel more responsible. And then there was the baby. His son. Every time he thought about it, something inside him stopped him from following the easy path that everyone around him suggested. Lucas found himself wondering what the future held for that child. She deserved to grow up with love, care, and a chance at a better life. But the fear of facing society, of seeing his public image crumble, paralyzed him. He had built his life based on reputation, on being admired and respected. Would taking on Sophia and the child mean giving up all of that? However, doubts began to eat away at his mind. Is all of this worth it? He asked himself during his sleepless nights. What was the point of being admired by people who judged him only by his bank account? What really mattered in the life he had built? Sophia's words, spoken months ago, echoed in his mind. "I just want a chance to be seen as someone." Lucas was beginning to realize that he also wanted something similar. He wanted to be seen as someone, but a real someone. Not just as the impeccable millionaire that everyone expected him to be. As the baby grew, Lucas's dilemma grew more intense. He knew he had to make a decision, but he was caught between two worlds. The fear of losing everything he had achieved held him to one side, while the voice of his conscience and his growing connection with Sophia and the baby pulled him to the other. One night, alone in his penthouse, Lucas looked out the window at the city that had always been the stage for his rise. Outside, the lights were shining, life was going on. Everything seemed so distant, so unreal. He realized that, despite having everything, the money, the status, the influence, he had lost something essential. Maybe it was the humanity that had always been missing from his life of luxury. Or maybe it was the courage to follow his heart. Lucas was faced with a choice that would define the man he would be for the rest of his life. And for the first time, he began to understand that some things cannot be bought or regained with money. He had to decide, maintain his impeccable public image, or assume the love, responsibility, and consequences of getting involved with Sophia and their future child. The day of the birth arrived without warning, in a silent dawn. Sophia was alone, as usual, in a temporary shelter she had found that week. The contractions started slowly, but soon intensified, and the fear of not getting help took over her. The world seemed distant, and the pain was overwhelming. But even in the midst of her suffering, there was a strength inside Sophia, the certainty that everything was about to change. Luckily, a volunteer at the shelter noticed her condition and took her to a public hospital. It was not a comfortable experience, far from what most would imagine for the birth of a child. The room was cold, the doctors rushed and impersonal. But despite everything, Sophia was ready. When she heard her son's first cry, all the pain, fear, and anguish seemed to disappear for a moment. That was her son, a new life, and with it, a new beginning. Lucas found out about the birth a few hours later. He was in an important meeting when his phone vibrated. The message was short. Sophia gave birth. A boy. He stood there for a few seconds, unable to fully process the news. A whirlwind of emotions took over him. Relief, fear, happiness, and above all, uncertainty about what to do next. He knew that this moment marked a point of no return. Despite all the chaos around him, Lucas decided to go to the hospital. He didn't tell anyone, didn't talk to his family or friends. He was alone, driving through the streets while his mind raced faster than the car. The doubts kept arising. How would society see him now? How would he be able to reconcile this new reality with the life he had built? But there was something stronger than his worries. A desire to meet his son. When he arrived at the hospital, the environment was very different from anything he had ever known. Lucas, with his designer clothes and impeccable appearance, was completely out of place. The public hospital was modest, with narrow corridors and worn walls. He felt curious, perhaps even judgmental looks, but none of that stopped him. When he was taken to the room where Sophia was, his heart raced, and when he finally entered, the scene he saw completely disarmed him. Sophia, tired and exhausted, held the little baby in her arms. Her face, marked by pain, now displayed a serenity that Lucas had never seen before. The silence in the room was broken only by the soft sound of the baby breathing. He approached slowly, not knowing how to act, how to speak. And then, for the first time, he saw the son who was now part of his life. He was a fragile boy, with a serene face and small eyes closed. As he approached, Lucas felt a wave of emotions that he had never experienced before. Something inside him changed at that moment. The public image, the pressure, the fear of being ridiculed, everything seemed to dissolve in the simplicity of that moment. He reached out and carefully touched the baby's tiny foot, and in that simple gesture, Lucas felt a connection that could not be ignored. Sophia, still panting, looked at Lucas with a mixture of surprise and gratitude. She had not expected him to appear, much less at that moment. But something in his eyes made her believe that, perhaps, he was finally beginning to understand the weight of this new life. The birth of the baby was not only the beginning of a new journey for her, it was also a turning point for Lucas. In the days that followed, he began to visit more often, getting closer, even if hesitantly. There was a growing bond between him and the baby. With each visit, the fear and confusion began to give way to something stronger: love. A sense of genuine responsibility that he had never experienced before. Lucas held his son in his arms, watched every move, and felt that his life was slowly taking a completely unexpected turn. But that didn't mean everything was settled. Lucas still lived in two worlds: the private one, where he was beginning to accept his new reality as a father, and the public one, where the pressure to maintain his reputation continued. He knew his life would never be the same again, but he still wasn't sure how to balance these two realities. Sophia, for her part, remained steadfast, accepting Lucas's support with gratitude, but not depending on him for her survival. She knew that the road ahead would still be full of challenges. The birth of their son had changed everything. For Lucas, it was the beginning of an internal transformation. The connection with the baby was growing, and despite all the obstacles, he knew he could no longer run away from this new responsibility. But the internal battle continued, and now the biggest challenge was figuring out how to balance the love he was beginning to feel with the life he had always known. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time, Lucas felt ready to face whatever came, because deep down, that little being in his arms had given new meaning to his life. 5 years had passed since the birth of Lucas and Sophia's son, and in that time, many things had changed. The baby, who had previously been seen as the result of a scandal and a symbol of shame for some, was now growing up healthy and full of life, defying everyone's expectations. His name was Gabriel, and he was increasingly becoming the center of an unexpected transformation in his parents' lives, and, in part, in the society that had judged them so much. Gabriel was different, and everyone around him noticed it from an early age. Even at such a young age, he had a presence that captivated anyone who met him. There was something special in his eyes, an infinite curiosity about the world, a kindness that seemed to come naturally to him. People who had previously looked down on Lucas and Sophia now saw something in this child that disarmed their prejudices. He was living proof that humble origins did not define anyone's destiny. In the early years, Sophia dedicated all her time to Gabriel. The difficulties did not disappear overnight, but with Lucas's sporadic support, she was able to give her son a decent life. Although she still faced the daily struggles of a single mother, the sparkle in Gabriel's eyes was her greatest reward. He was her pride, her reason to stay strong, and her greatest gift to the world. Lucas, on the other hand, gradually grew closer and closer to Gabriel. The connection between father and son grew naturally. Lucas no longer cared so much about what society thought or about the veiled criticism that still appeared. Time spent with Gabriel transformed him. The child had a unique way of seeing the world, and this awakened something new in Lucas, a feeling of redemption. Gabriel was not just any child. With his energy, he won hearts wherever he went. At school, despite his origins being different from other children, he stood out for his intelligence and kindness. While his classmates were impressed by toys or designer clothes, Gabriel seemed more interested in listening to people's stories, understanding their feelings, and helping those in need. His teachers saw extraordinary potential in him. "This boy has something special," they would often say. He was also becoming a favorite in the neighborhood. Those same people who, years before, had looked down on Sophia, now greeted her when she walked by with Gabriel. The boy, with his easy smile and his ability to talk to everyone, gradually changed the perceptions around him. He was not just the son of a poor mother and a millionaire father. He was the hope that something greater was emerging from this unexpected union. Lucas, who had previously lived between two worlds, began to see Gabriel as a second chance, an opportunity to redeem himself from the mistakes and superficiality that had dominated his life for so long. Every time he saw his son, Lucas felt further removed from the pressures of high society. He no longer cared about the opinions of others, and the jokes and judgments that had once tormented him now seemed insignificant. Gabriel became the bridge between the world of luxury and the world of simplicity. He represented something pure, something true. Over time, the story of Gabriel and his origin began to circulate around the city. What had once been seen as a shame now became a symbol of overcoming. Gabriel was proof that love and humanity were stronger than any social barrier. He innocently and unintentionally broke the structures of prejudice that had surrounded his existence since birth. The people who had laughed at and criticized Lucas now looked at him with renewed respect. What had once seemed like an error of judgment became an example that sometimes unexpected paths lead to the most beautiful discoveries. For Sophia, Gabriel was much more than a son. He was her victory. Every time she saw the boy's smile, every time he excelled at school or made new friends, she remembered all the sacrifices she had made to keep him alive and strong. His struggle on the streets, the rejection, the loneliness, all of it was worth it when she saw Gabriel grow up so full of life and hope. The boy, now 5 years old, had become a symbol of redemption. He proved that love and willpower can overcome even the most difficult circumstances. As Gabriel grew up, he seemed to bridge two worlds that had once seemed irreconcilable, and in the process, he also helped his parents rediscover what was truly important in life. Lucas, watching his son play, knew that Gabriel had given him something all his money could never buy: a new outlook on himself and life. He had finally found redemption, not by escaping society's judgments, but by giving himself over to what truly mattered: his love for his son and his desire to be the best father he could be. Gabriel's future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. He was already changing the world around him, and in some ways, he was changing all those lucky enough to know him. Over the 5 years following Gabriel's birth, Lucas underwent a profound and unexpected transformation. The man who had once been obsessed with status, wealth, and the opinions of high society began to question everything he had ever considered important. His son's influence on him was gradual but powerful. Gabriel, with his simplicity and generosity, opened Lucas's eyes to a world he had ignored his entire life. Little by little, Lucas began to distance himself from the toxic people who had always surrounded him. Friends who had previously pressured him to keep up appearances or ridiculed him for the decisions he had made regarding Sophia and Gabriel began to lose ground in his life. The extravagant parties, luxurious dinners, and superficial conversations were replaced by more intimate and meaningful moments. He no longer found satisfaction in keeping up appearances. The superficiality that had once defined him now seemed empty and purposeless. Lucas's transformation did not happen overnight. In the beginning, he still felt the weight of judgment and the pressure to keep his public image intact. But little by little, his love for Gabriel and the respect he came to feel for Sophia freed him from these bonds. Every moment he spent with his son made him realize that there was more to life than accumulating wealth and social recognition. Gabriel's innocence and joy reminded him of what really mattered: family, honesty, and empathy. Lucas also began to reflect on his past. He remembered his father's advice, which always emphasized that success was measured by the amount of money you had in the bank and the number of people who admired you. But now, Lucas saw how empty these metrics were. He had built his entire life based on these values, and for a long time he believed that they were enough to fill the void he felt. However, living with Gabriel and Sophia showed him that true wealth lay in living a life with purpose and love. This process of reflection led him to make drastic decisions. Lucas began to change his priorities. He moved away from business projects focused purely on profit and began investing in social causes. Observing Sophia and so many other people who struggled daily to survive, he realized that he could use his resources to make a difference in the world. And so, Lucas began funding shelters for homeless people, schools for underprivileged children, and initiatives aimed at social inclusion. The impact of his transformation did not go unnoticed. Those who had previously criticized him for ruining his reputation were now surprised by his change of heart. Lucas no longer cared about what people said. He was focused on doing what he believed was right, something that, for him, transcended any concern for his public image. His transformation was not a marketing ploy or an attempt to rehabilitate his reputation. It was genuine, motivated by his desire to be an example for Gabriel and leave a positive legacy. His new investments were geared towards causes he truly believed in. He became involved in projects that helped low-income families, educated children from marginalized communities, and supported social entrepreneurs. Lucas began to visit communities he had previously ignored, hearing stories of struggle, perseverance, and overcoming. The more he became involved, the more he realized that his financial power had the potential to transform lives in real and tangible ways. His relationship with Sophia also changed during this period. They went from two people united only by the circumstance of Gabriel's birth to a true partnership. Although they never formalized a romantic relationship, there was a deep mutual respect between them. Lucas admired Sophia for her strength, resilience, and ability to raise Gabriel with so much love, even in the face of so much adversity. She, in turn, noticed the change in Lucas and knew that, even though he came from a completely different world than hers, he was striving to become a better person. Gabriel, as always, was the center of everything. He grew up surrounded by love and with a solid foundation of values, something that both Lucas and Sophia made sure to ensure. Lucas knew that his son was growing up in a world full of inequality, and he wanted to do his part to ensure that Gabriel saw an example of responsibility and humanity, regardless of his privileged background. Lucas's transformation was profound and, more importantly, lasting. He learned that the power and money he had only made sense if used for the greater good. The 5 years of living with Gabriel changed him from the inside out. From a man who lived to please others and maintain his social status, he transformed into someone who now found purpose in helping others and creating a better future for his son. Lucas was no longer the arrogant millionaire he once was. Now, he was a man seeking redemption, not only in the eyes of others, but most importantly, in his own. And as he continued his journey to reconnect with his humanity, he knew that this transformation was just the beginning of something much bigger. Fate, as many say, has an ironic way of exacting its dues. Those who, years before, had laughed at Lucas and Sophia, judging them for their choices and the unexpected situation of their pregnancy, were now beginning to face their own twists and turns. Life, with its peculiar way of balancing forces, caused many of those who had mocked and despised the millionaire and the mother of his child to experience drastic drops in their own realities. It all started subtly. Some of Lucas's longtime friends, who had previously bragged about their fortunes and criticized his decisions, began to face financial problems. The real estate market, in which many of them had invested, suffered a sudden downturn, and what had once seemed a guarantee of success turned into a nightmare. Businesses went bankrupt, fortunes were squandered, and the same men who had laughed at Lucas for ruining their reputation now found themselves struggling to maintain their lifestyles. For others, the blow came in a different way. Personal scandals began to emerge. Secrets that had been kept under lock and key began to come to light, tarnishing the reputations of many. Men who had been proud of their traditional and perfect families but who had hidden betrayals and fraud, saw their lives fall apart. The society that had previously praised them now treated them with contempt and indifference. These same individuals who, for years, had criticized Lucas for having tarnished his image by impregnating a homeless woman, were now the target of tabloid headlines, victims of their own actions and choices. The most curious thing, however, was the change in perception towards Lucas. The man who had previously been ridiculed and seen as a fool for having gotten involved with Sophia was now seen differently. His transformation over the years, his commitment to social causes and his dedication to his family had made him an admirable figure, not only for those closest to him, but also for the community in general. The man who everyone believed had made an irreversible mistake by choosing to follow his heart instead of social expectations was now seen as someone who had found the true meaning of life. Lucas, for his part, did not rejoice in the downfall of his former friends. He had changed profoundly and knew that what they were going through was part of a larger cycle of life. However, it was impossible not to notice the irony of fate. Those same people who had laughed at him were now seeking within themselves the strength that he had found in Sophia and Gabriel. What had previously been a reason for mockery now turned into veiled admiration. Lucas, with his new attitude, was an example that adversity can be overcome, as long as there is resilience and purpose. For Sophia, this change of scenery did not go unnoticed either. She remembered the looks of contempt she received on the street, the people who crossed to the other side just to avoid having to look at her. Now, these same people greeted her, often with a shy smile, recognizing, even if silently, the strength and dignity she had demonstrated. Sophia never sought revenge, but she could not deny that seeing these changes around her gave her a sense of poetic justice. She knew, from the beginning, that her value was never in the opinions of others, but rather in the love she felt for Gabriel, and in the certainty that she was doing the best she could to raise him with love and values. Gabriel, still so young, did not fully understand the complexities of the adult world around him, but he was beginning to notice that people treated him differently. He, who had always been an observant and sensitive child, saw something in the eyes of others beyond simple curiosity. He knew there was something special about his story, something that somehow touched those who knew him, and although it was too early for him to fully understand the impact he had, Gabriel felt that he somehow represented something greater to his parents and those around him. Fate had undoubtedly taken an unexpected turn. Those who had once ridiculed Lucas for choosing to follow his heart instead of keeping up appearances were now facing their own challenges. The fortune that had once seemed assured was gone, and the scandals that had hidden beneath a facade of perfection had emerged, exposing the fragility of their lives. And while many of those who had laughed were now on the verge of collapse, Lucas, Sophia, and Gabriel stood as symbols of resilience, strength, and above all, love. This twist of fate was more than revenge. It was a lesson. Lucas's life, once a source of ridicule, had become a story of overcoming. He discovered that what mattered most was not what others thought of him, but the value he placed on his own choices and the love he had for his family. Those who had laughed now looked at him with respect and perhaps even a little envy. After all, Lucas had found something that many of them could never achieve with all the money in the world: peace with himself and a life full of purpose. Life has a unique way of aligning the pieces, and after years of struggles and twists and turns, what seemed like a story of scandal and judgment turned into a narrative of overcoming, love, and redemption. Lucas and Sophia, who once came from completely opposite worlds, now walked side by side as a strong and inspiring family. The beggar who was once ridiculed for getting pregnant by a millionaire, and the businessman who found himself rejected by high society, had overcome all obstacles together and now achieved the recognition they never sought, but which inevitably came to them. Sophia, who spent years on the streets fighting for survival, was now far from that reality. With Lucas's support and her own unwavering strength, she rebuilt her life. Little by little, she returned to her studies, invested in new opportunities, and reinvented herself as an independent and resilient woman. Her difficult past still followed her, but no longer as a burden. On the contrary, Sophia made a point of using her story as a platform to inspire other women who, like her, were facing adversity and finding themselves trapped in life's circumstances. She began working with social projects that helped women in vulnerable situations, offering them support, guidance, and the chance to start over. Lucas, on the other hand, had completely transformed. Far from the superficial man who focused only on luxury that he had been in the past, he was now seen as a businessman committed to social causes. The story of his personal transformation, from someone obsessed with his public image to someone who found purpose alongside his family, began to spread throughout society. He continued to invest in projects that offered opportunities to those who, like Sophia, needed a second chance in life. The media, which had once exposed him as the millionaire who got involved with a beggar, now told a different story. That of a man who used his wealth and influence to promote good. Society, which had previously rejected and laughed at them, began to see them differently. The public narrative shifted, and the family of Lucas, Sophia, and Gabriel came to be seen as a symbol of resilience. What had once been the butt of jokes was now a source of inspiration. The same people who had mocked Lucas and Sophia now admired them for overcoming societal expectations and building a life based on love and unity, no matter the adverse circumstances they faced. Reconciliation with society was not immediate, but over time it became inevitable. Lucas and Sophia did not seek public approval, but the impact of their actions and the example they set began to change people's perceptions. Criticism was replaced by regret, and many of those who had previously looked down on them found themselves reflecting on their own prejudices. The couple did not seek revenge or resentment, but instead moved forward, focusing on the well-being of their family and the causes they embraced. The charity events that Lucas began to organize began to attract positive media attention. During these events, he always made a point of giving Sophia a voice, who shared her life story, highlighting the importance of never judging someone by the circumstances they face. Her words deeply touched those who listened to them. She did not speak as a victim, but as someone who found the strength to rise up and rebuild her own life. Each time she told her story, Sophia reminded everyone that everyone deserves a second chance and that love and solidarity are capable of changing any destiny. Public recognition grew over time. Newspaper headlines, which had once made them look ridiculous, now highlighted the power of their journey of transformation. Lucas and Sophia began to be invited to speak at events and conferences about overcoming obstacles, resilience, and the impact of choices on one's life. The couple, who had previously been the subject of gossip, were now an example that social barriers can be overcome with courage, determination, and love. Gabriel, the child who was the catalyst for all this transformation, grew up surrounded by this new reality. He, who had stood out since he was little for his kindness and curiosity, now better understood the role he had played in his parents' journey. Gabriel was constantly reminded of how his arrival into the world had transformed lives, and he grew up knowing that his story was special. For him, however, the most important thing was always the love and unity of his family, who together faced all difficulties and came out stronger. In the end, Lucas and Sophia, once separated by social divides, were recognized as a family that overcame the improbable and showed that love, resilience, and empathy can transcend any barrier. Society, which once condemned them, now regretted its hasty judgments, seeing in them an example of strength and resilience. Lucas, Sophia, and Gabriel became living symbols that, no matter where you come from, it is possible to build a full and meaningful life when you are surrounded by love and purpose.